What's up, guys? It's Dan from Coin Bureau Trading. Today, I want to tell you guys about an altcoin that I think has incredible potential, like 5 to 10x potential. It's not some small meme coin. It's not some speculative small cap altcoin. It's a large cap altcoin that nobody's been paying attention to, and it's one that I want to talk about today. And it's one I think it's going to be a very special video. Let's say, to put it lightly. Anyways, if this is the kind of content that you enjoy, then be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ping that notification bell before we get started. Do keep in mind that nothing in this video is financial advice. It's just my personal analysis of this altcoin. Your analysis could be different, and if it is, that's awesome, because the more difference of opinion that we have, the better investors and the better traders we're all going to become. So I'll come right out and say, guys, that the altcoin I'll be talking about today is Aptos. Before you roll your eyes or click away from the video or think, what the hell, like, how could you say Aptos? Of all the possible cryptos, of all the large cap cryptos, how could you say that Aptos is the one that has kind of like the most potential? Basically, guys, it all has to do with an announcement that was made by Meta a couple of days ago here. Again, it's something that I think flew off of everyone's radar. No one is paying attention to this. And it's basically that Meta is considering using stablecoins for cross-border payments. And at first glance, you might think, okay, what does this have to do with Meta? What does this have to do, or sorry, what does this have to do with Aptos? Why could this be super bullish for APT? To understand why, guys, we have to go back in time and understand the history of Aptos. For those of you who don't know, Aptos was technically created by Facebook, which of course has since rebranded to Meta, but Aptos was originally created by Facebook specifically for the purpose of stablecoin payments, okay? Like, just let that sink in. And even Aptos's design, compared to something like Sui, which also split off from the original project, I'll explain in just a second. But even the way that Aptos is designed is very in line with the way that Facebook had originally designed its digital currency, okay? And I'll reiterate. So Meta, or I guess Facebook, which is now Meta, originally launched a cryptocurrency that was focused on digital payments, on stablecoin payments, and then basically Aptos was born out of that. So let's just go back super quick here through the history. Back in 2019, Facebook reveals this digital currency. Some of you might remember it was called Libra. Basically, politicians all around the world were freaking out. All the central banks everywhere freaking out, right? Because Facebook, they also have Instagram and WhatsApp and all these different applications. And the fear was that, like, if Facebook was to basically launch this digital currency, then all government currencies would be undermined, right? Because it's like, why would anyone use anything else? People would just use WhatsApp or Facebook or wherever to send money around. That would be bad for the banks. That would be bad for the central banks. It would be bad for the governments, right? It would basically put an enormous amount of power in Facebook's hand. So, surprise, surprise, eventually, basically the crypto project was wound down. And again, I'm sorry that I'm fumbling my words here, because it's like a pretty complicated history. Basically, what happened is, like, Facebook tried to rebrand Libra to DM, and they tried to, like, change the governance structure, and they basically did everything they could to try and appease regulators, but unfortunately, it didn't work. And so in early 2022, so roughly 2.5 years after the crypto project was originally announced, it was shut down. And then, of course, some of you will know that what happened is that the team behind DM, which again used to be known as Libra, I know it's very confusing. But the team behind behind Facebook's crypto project, they split into two. One of them created Sui, and the other one created Aptos. And again, this ties into what I was saying earlier. If you actually look at Aptos's chain, of course, we'll get to the price in a bit. I know you're all wondering, okay, but tell me about the price. We'll come back to that after, because I really need to make the case here. Because without this context, I don't think my price analysis is going to make any sense. So basically, guys, if you look at Aptos specifically on-chain, specifically at its stablecoin volume, even at the way that Aptos has been angling itself, if you look at, I think it's Avery Ching, if I'm not mistaken, the current CEO of Aptos and one of the co-founders, if you look at the way that they've been marketing Aptos, it's all about stablecoin payments. They're saying, hey, we're the fastest chain for USDT. If you look at USDT supply on Aptos, it's been growing massively. Like, it's the supply of USDT on Aptos is like almost half of Aptos's market cap, which is pretty crazy. Like, as a ratio of market cap to stablecoins, like, it's looking really, really big. And I think that again, makes it clear to me on my end that Aptos is really focused here on payments, on stablecoin payments. And you have Meta coming out and saying, hey, we're looking into stablecoin payments. Who do you think they could partner with potentially? Which of all the crypto blockchains that are out there, which one do you think would make the most sense for Meta to partner with? Would they go with Ethereum or with Solana, or would they go with the blockchain that they literally created, and a blockchain that not only that they created, but is still faithful, let's say, to the original model of how Libra was originally created. So it's basically, in theory, going to be super simple for Meta to integrate Aptos. Again, I'm not saying that's going to happen, But and to be honest, guys, like it's possible that it won't because maybe there's going to be too much regulatory scrutiny. Because obviously, you don't have to be a genius to see that. Like, wait a minute, if Meta then partners with Aptos, isn't that basically them the same as like basically just like taking on Libra again? And like basically, yeah. And of course, some regulators might take issue with that, although with the new SEC, maybe not. But the thing is, guys, that even if Meta doesn't use Aptos for stablecoins or whatever, they could always use Aptos for something else. And this is where things get very interesting because besides Aptos' focus on stablecoin payments, it also has a very close relationship with these like a Web 2 big tech giants, right? So where Sui has been angling more towards like GameFi and whatever, Aptos has been really trying to cozy up to like Microsoft, Google, these big players. They've been penning partnerships for years and years and years. And where I think that Aptos could have lots of utility, I do think that the stablecoins thing is probably the lowest hanging fruit, let's say. But another aspect that a lot of people are overlooking is, of course, the Web 2 integrations with crypto. So some of you guys might remember this is back in 2022 that Instagram had actually launched support for NFTs temporarily. I think they were just like testing it out. Eventually, they shut down the program. I don't know if it was a few months later or a year later. But Instagram was testing NFTs on different blockchains. I think it was like Flow, Solana, Ethereum, Polygon, and of course, again, like now that Aptos has launched, if Instagram was to introduce NFTs again, which chain do you think they would choose for that? I think that Aptos would be somewhere on that list, probably at the top of the list, because again, Facebook for those of you who don't know, like Instagram is owned by Facebook, now known as Meta, and of course there's also WhatsApp. So it's like again, of all the chains that this conglomerate of tech platforms could integrate, I think that Aptos is obviously at the top of the list because I imagine that behind the scenes, like Facebook and Meta had been working already on these integrations for years. So for them to plug in something like Aptos is probably way easier to do than plug in something like Solana or even Ethereum, right? And again, this is something that no one's paying attention to, and especially when we see positive crypto regulations start to be passed, especially around stablecoins. Like imagine a stablecoin bill is passed. How quickly do you think Meta would integrate Aptos for stablecoin payments? I think it would happen like literally like within hours of the announcement. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but again, when you consider the stablecoin bill could be passed potentially by the end of this month, like this is stuff that's potentially coming up very soon here. But anyways, before I get into the more into the charts, the last thing I want to mention, guys, specifically as it relates to Aptos' relationship with Microsoft, some of you guys might not know that Microsoft has actually put in a bid to buy TikTok. And of course, the interesting thing about Aptos, again, like because it's like kind of tied with all these social media companies, it wouldn't surprise me at all if like because of their close relationship with Microsoft, let's say Microsoft acquires TikTok, and then they say, hey, we're going to introduce crypto features. Again, which blockchain do you think they would use? They'd probably use Aptos, right? And because Aptos and Microsoft have a very close relationship, I think they have at least two, maybe three like partnerships around Web3, AI, all this like integration and all this type of stuff. So the idea that Microsoft would integrate would use Aptos, I guess, to integrate with TikTok, I think makes sense. And as kind of like a side note, and again, this is just a coincidence, I'm sure, but I'm someone who actually uses Microsoft Word, and those of you who use Microsoft Word might know that the default font has been set to Aptos, which I'm sure is just a total coincidence, and and it's just like a tinfoil hat. How dare you even imply that the original font, which I think was like Calibri or however you pronounce it, and now it's Aptos over the last couple of months. I'm sure that's just a complete coincidence. Complete coincidence. Anyways, guys, it's about time we got to the charts here with Aptos. So, of course, the main problem, I guess you could say, with Aptos is that you look at the chart and you say, wow, Aptos has just been underperforming. It's done absolutely nothing, basically for like almost 3 years now, right? They're 2.5 years roughly. If we look at Aptos through the lens of market cap, though, you guys will notice that Aptos's market cap has actually been growing, which of course suggests that there's been lots of insiders that have been selling. So this is where things get really interesting because of course there's a lot of debate around like token unlocks and like, oh, like because there's so many token unlocks that means Aptos can never pump. The thing is that it really depends on a case by case basis. Sui also had massive unlocks. Sui has had no problems rallying in 2021. At the beginning of 2021, Solana had a 90% supply unlock and it literally rallied by 50x. So clearly supply unlocks are not the only factor here. And of course, when it comes to, we have to basically look at it on a case-by-case basis. But in Aptos's case, it begs the question. It's like, why has Aptos basically performed so poorly? And a lot of people have pointed to the former co-founder, Mo Shaikh, and they were accusing him that he was dumping his APT. But he literally tweeted the other day, or posted, whatever you want to call it, the other day that he still owns 98% of his Aptos tokens. And if you think about it, just think about this logically, guys. Like, what do you think makes more sense if you're an investor in Aptos? Are you just going to dump your tokens on the market, or are you going to lock it up, for example, in DeFi and use it as collateral? This is something that, especially if you're not familiar with like, or not to say like, again, I'm not like wealthy by any means, but if you're someone who's not familiar with managing money, a lot of people don't know that the reason why people are so rich, like Elon Musk and these guys, they don't actually have that money. What they have is they have an asset and then they borrow against that asset. So I assume that it's probably the same for Aptos, where a lot of these guys who are kind of like Aptos whales, I think it's literally not in their interest to dump, because if they do, then the price goes down, and then they, well, besides the fact the price goes down, if they were actually to sell, they would have to pay tax, assuming that they're in like a tax jurisdiction. I'm sure many of them are not. But for those early investors who are in like a jurisdiction where they have to pay big tax, which I imagine Mo Shaikh falls into that, because I believe he's based in the U.S., or at least is a U.S. citizen. It makes more sense for him to borrow against APT rather than sell it, because then he doesn't have to pay any tax. I don't know if you guys know that. Again, like, speak with your accountants. Don't like take my word for it. But to my understanding, in the United States, if you borrow against your asset, you don't pay any tax, right? So, and this is basically how rich people don't pay any tax. So there you go. There's your little alpha there. But of course, it begs the question: okay, if it's not Mo Shaikh who's been dumping, or certain people who's been dumping, then who has been dumping the supply on the market and basically causing this price action to be so poor? This is actually where things get very interesting, guys. So if you go back actually to Aptos's funding history, you guys might notice that FTX was actually a pretty large investor in Aptos. And what's really interesting is if you look specifically at FTX's bankruptcy process, FTX held obviously quite a bit of APT. They held quite a bit of Solana. They held quite a bit of all these other cryptos. But the thing is that most of the cryptos like Solana and whatever, and even in the case of Sui, Miston Labs actually bought back FTX's stake, I think, for 100 million. So Miston Labs actually bought back the APT that FTX had purchased. So Miston Labs is the company behind Sui, for anyone who doesn't know. But in the case of Aptos, it doesn't look like they bought back the stake. And as far as I can tell, like based on my own research, basically FTX dumped Aptos on the open market when they were given permission to pay back basically to pay back the creditors, which I think was sometime in 2024. So it makes sense in a weird way that like basically the main reason why Aptos has struggled so much, especially last year, the main reason why it struggled so much is because FTX was basically selling all the APT that they had bought to repay creditors. And you have to also remember, guys, that it's not just the people who are selling, but it's also the buying. If you have lots of people selling, or even if you have if you even have like just like a small amount of people selling, but there's no one showing up to buy, then it's going to have a profound impact on the price. And I basically think that's what happened in Aptos's case, is that no one really knew. It's like, okay, like what exactly is Aptos about? Like with Solana, it was about meme coins. With Sui, it's about like this GameFi. But then when it comes to Aptos, it's like, well, I don't really understand what this thing is about. Like the chart hasn't really looked super good. I can see that there's, all these unlocks coming and whatever. So I'm going to stay away from that, right? Like that's probably what most retail investors were thinking. And then meanwhile, FTX was basically dumping, to repay their creditors. So I personally think that that was probably the biggest factor that was keeping Aptos's price suppressed all throughout 2024. And again, is that true? Could it be something else? Could there even be like nefarious activity that, because Sui and Aptos split off from the same project, Sui is backed by the same people as Aptos? Could we see early investors in Aptos who like want to see Sui succeed, like purposely dumping APT? That's also possible. Just throwing that out there. Crypto can be a really nasty place. But I think that the, Occam's razor, the most logical explanation here as to why Aptos has performed so poorly, again, doesn't have to do with Mo Shaikh or whoever like dumping their tokens. It could have been FTX basically forcefully having to dump on the open market to repay creditors. And again, this is a factor that I think a lot of people have missed. And again, like people aren't willing to go down and like go into the details and like find all this stuff. And again, that's why I'm doing it now, is like I really want to explain to you guys, specifically why I think Aptos could pump, why it's been underperforming. So now that you have that context in mind, because of course these FTX sales are done and creditors are going to be repaid, I think, starting at the end of this month. So all those sales have happened in 2024. Of course, 2025 was really brutal because of the Trump's tariffs. So there's no surprises there that Aptos has been struggling in 2025. But that basically explains the last almost like year and a half of why APT has just been perpetually underperforming. Is basically there was a large supply unlock, and a lot of that supply was probably going to FTX, and FTX was just dumping on the open market to repay creditors. That's my going theory. Who knows if that's accurate? But yeah, guys, like that's what I truly believe was the main cause. And could there be some nefarious activity? Anyways, so this brings me finally to Aptos's chart. We're here looking at APT on the weekly on Binance, and of course, basically APT has been chopping in a range literally for like 2.5 years here. It's been just chopping in a range, I don't know, between let's say around $4 and roughly $19-20, and it's been just chopping, and what's really interesting, I guess, with the chart like this is that you're at a stage where the only people who hold APT are people who believe in it, and there's kind of like no one else really left to sell because again, FTX is finished selling. Most people are finished selling. Maybe there were some retail who aped in, late last year and or even like early last year, and they capitulated. So literally at this stage, especially when we're at the lower end of this range, we're at a range where the only people left here are people who believe in the project. And full disclosure, I do hold Aptos as part of my personal portfolio. It's not a very big position, like relative to my other holdings like Solana, Sui, and even Bitcoin. But I do hold Aptos, and I can confirm that it's like, yeah, like I've basically just been like holding like for this last year, and yeah, I'm just holding. I'm not like itching to sell or anything. And I'm sure that other people who are in a similar position who have been accumulating or buying APT, they're waiting for a breakout out of this range. And to give you guys an idea of just how big that could be, let's take a look at XRP, which I'm sure a chart that many of you are familiar with. XRP, same idea. It was basically chopping sideways for like a year and a half, and then one day you get an announcement like Trump gets elected, and boom, and it just like launches out of that. It just launches into the stratosphere, and I'm sure XRP is going to keep going higher. It literally went up like 6x in 4 weeks here, right? So again, like when it comes to Aptos, if we get an announcement, again, maybe it'll be Meta saying, yeah, we're going to integrate Aptos for stablecoin payments, or maybe maybe Instagram says we're going to integrate Aptos for NFTs, or maybe Microsoft says we're going to integrate Aptos into TikTok if they acquire TikTok or whatever, right? There's all these possible catalysts that could come up for Aptos. And again, in my view, and I guess I can summarize it this way, in my view, Aptos is the crypto that has the highest chance of being integrated with Web2 companies, in my opinion. And that's for the simple reason that it was originally created by Facebook. It was originally, like, its current design is similar enough to Facebook's original design that it should be easy to integrate into Facebook's various platforms, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, or WhatsApp, or maybe even this Meta, like the metaverse that they're working on. Maybe Aptos will be integrated into that. Who knows? But basically, in terms of integration with Web2 companies, and again, of course, Aptos working with Microsoft, it looks like that Aptos is the most integratable blockchain of them all, like for these Web2 companies. And again, I think the only thing that's standing in the way of that is just like regulation. Maybe they're waiting for the right time to make that announcement. Who knows? My point being is that when I look at Aptos's chart, all I see is just XRP before it had this massive run up, like whatever it is, 6x. And I'm sure XRP is going to go even higher. And by the time XRP is done rallying, it'll be like a 10x off the lows. To see the same thing for Aptos, I think is 100% possible. Especially, imagine how strong that narrative is going to be when people realize, like, let's say that partnership is announced and people realize, wait a minute, Aptos is basically just like Libra, and Facebook is just like doing the same thing they were doing before. Like, wow, like this is going to be huge, right? That's what people are going to be saying, and I'm basically saying it here, I guess, potentially a few weeks in advance. Again, I'm not guaranteeing that this is going to happen by any means, but of all the catalysts that are the most likely to take Aptos above basically out of this range and like basically into the stratosphere, I think that's going to be the one. And of course, there's one more thing that I do need to mention, and of course, that's a question of like, okay, but like, what is the thing that is going to get like the speculation going in Aptos? This is something I've mentioned. I don't know if I mentioned in other videos, but it's something I've mentioned a lot in the Coin Bureau Club, and that's that I kind of see like each chain as having its own like speculative, I don't want to say speculative bubble, but like basically their methodology for getting people to buy the token. So for example, in Solana's case, meme coins arguably were a way of kind of like getting people to buy Solana, because to buy a meme coin, you first need to buy Sol. So all what the meme coin hype basically did is it resulted in people buying a whole bunch of Solana so they could buy these meme coins, and that caused Solana's price to pump, right? Very, very basic. You can see a more extreme example of that with virtuals, right? To buy a virtuals AI agent, you needed to buy the virtual token, and the virtual token literally went like up like 100x or whatever. Not saying that's going to happen with Aptos, but just to give you a sense of like the mechanism that's at play. When it comes to Sui, I personally think, and this is a bit of a hot take, I think the speculative thing around Sui that could cause it to pump is probably going to be its Sui domains, because these names, these human readable names, I don't think it's something that it doesn't really make sense in the context of payments, because I think blockchain wallet addresses are easier than like BIC and SWIFT and whatever numbers and routing numbers and all that stuff, right? But I do think that human readable names is something that is going to be used a lot in GameFi, because you have gamer tags and stuff like that, right? So the idea that that the main speculative wave on Sui is going to be something related to these domain names at some point, I think that's very highly likely, especially because it fits in with the GameFi kind of angle of Sui. And then in terms of Aptos, members of the Coin Bureau Club will know that the speculative wave that I think is going to cause create this demand for APT is going to be emoji coins. And this is a platform that was launched late last year. Full disclosure, I do hold some emoji coins. I actually hold quite a few. The market cap is super tiny. No one even knows this exists. And it's pretty crazy because, of course, these emoji coins, that fits hand in glove, right, with the potential integrations with Web2 companies. So imagine Aptos integrates with WhatsApp, and then you're able to send like these emojis that actually have financial value on WhatsApp on Aptos, right? And of course, to buy these emojis, you have to buy APT, and they all trade against APT. So, where I could see like a speculative wave that's something similar to meme coins, like again, meme coins on Solana drove demand for Sol. Potentially, Sui domains will drive demand for Sui. And then in the case of Aptos, I believe that these emoji coins will drive demand for APT. And I can already see all the narratives there because, of course, relative to meme coins, there's a limited number of emojis, and there's even a limited number of emoji combinations. Yes, it's maybe in like, I don't know, like a few thousand or maybe a couple thousand or tens of thousands of emoji combinations, but that's way less than the millions and millions and millions and millions of meme coins that are out there, right? So you almost have like an artificially restricted supply of potential emojis, especially if you're just dealing with the singular ones. And I'm sure that's a narrative that's going to come out, and you're going to see like Murad and all these guys coming out and saying, yeah, well, if you look at the supply and demand thing, you can see that with meme coins, you can create an infinite number. But with these emoji coins, there's a limited number that can be made. And this, it results in more inflows on average per emoji. And that's why these are going to do so much better. But yeah, this is what I think is going to be the driver of like the speculative driver of the APT rally in terms of like an on-chain thing. But I do think that even without emoji coins, potential integrations between between Aptos and these Web2 companies is going to take APT way higher. And yeah, I guess the very last thing I'll mention is like when I say this, people say, okay, well, if you think APT is going to 5 or 10x, why don't you put everything into APT? Because I'm not an idiot. Because you need to be diversified, right, in your investments and your trades. You can't just say like, okay, well, you're telling me that this is going to go up 5 to 10x, but you're saying you only have a small allocation. It's like, yeah, because I have other higher conviction plays outside of Aptos. Like I'm not like an Aptos maxi here. I'm not like shilling APT. I just think that objectively of all the large cap altcoins, I actually think it's the one that people are sleeping on the most, because you can see it in the chart. They've just basically, like, the price has just been chopping for like 3 years. Like this is the definition of sleep right here. And eventually, you're going to see, again, similarly to XRP, at some point, you're going to see a breakout, and then within 3 or 4 weeks, boom, you're going to be up like 5 or 10x potentially. Again, no guarantees. But again, Aptos is a quality project. I don't think there's any issues there. I think everything is looking great in terms of the on-chain fundamentals and potential for partnerships and all that stuff. So that's all I'm saying is like this is just like one of many quality altcoins, but it's one that I think that not enough people are paying attention to. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying like, oh, you should go all in, or why aren't you going all in? Because I have a diversified portfolio. I have Sui, Solana. I literally have like 100 altcoins in my portfolio. Okay, guys. So I'm pretty spread out there. I'm 50% Bitcoin. So don't go crazy thinking, wow, like what the hell, what a degen. I'm 50% Bitcoin and then 50% in altcoins. Very simple. And I have like 100 different altcoins across different chains, and NFTs on top of that, and the emoji coins, of course. Anyway, so if you did find that content helpful, help us out, help me out, take advantage of some of the deals in the Coin Bureau deals page. We were using Binance there in case you didn't notice. We have a 20% trading fee discount and up to $600 in bonuses. If you can't use Binance for whatever reason, check out the other exchange deals we have. They're available to US and UK users. And when you use these deals, guys, you get a trading fee discount, the exchange gets a new user, and we get a cut of your transaction fee, or your trading fees, sorry. And so, it's a win-win-win for everyone, especially during bull markets. So do take advantage of those deals using the link in the description before they're gone. And again, if you did enjoy this video, then be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, ping that notification bell, and I'll see you in the next one.